So I'm very, very excited, mainly because of the amazing people who are here with us today and watching online. And I want to begin, actually, a strange place to start perhaps, but with some thank yous. What we're trying to do here today and tomorrow is really about building community, bringing communities together. And I want to thank all of you who've been involved in bringing us here today. First of all, thank you to all of you who are here in the room, not just for getting here on time, although we greatly appreciate that, but also for the participation you're going to provide in the next day or two. This may look like a rather formal and imposing and scary group of people up here. That's not the idea at all. We really want this to be a participatory exercise. We're here to explore how we can solve problems together. So this is all about sharing ideas. And as they say, there are no dumb ideas. This is all about exploring how we can use these tools to achieve that elusive number of 9,000 more quickly. So thank you for being here. Please pitch in. Just remember, you may be being live streamed while we do this. In fact, you are being live streamed. If that is a problem, please do let me or one of the other members of the organizing team know, and there are steps we can take to make sure your image is not used without your consent. Secondly, a huge thank you to the survivors that we have here with us today. Beginning with Min Dang and the Survivor Alliance, who provided excellent counsel to us as we developed a Survivor Scholars program to bring some Survivor Scholars here today. And thank you to 4 of them who have agreed to be named now. Ima Matul, Kelly Dawn, Justine Strong, and Charlena Powell. We're really inspired to have you with us. We're inspired by your fortitude and your resilience and your determination. Thank you so much for everything you're doing for the effort here today and tomorrow. Third, a giant thank you to these folks, the organizing committee, who've made this possible. You're going to hear from some of them right after me, so I won't say too much. But this has really been all about collaboration. We've organized this program collaboratively. It is financed collaboratively. So a giant thank you to all of you. I won't call you out by name, but it's really been inspiring to work with you so far. And let's hope it continues that way in the next day or two. Also, a very big thank you to my team, Emily, who's hiding out there, Alexandra, you'll meet both of them later, and Ben as well, but the whole team who've just moved mountains to get us all here organized today and for tomorrow. I'm really inspired every day by working with you. Thank you all so much. So let me come back then to the start. 9,000 people a day. That's a pretty challenging target, if you ask me. But I start these proceedings with a real sense of excitement and opportunity because I think with the potential we have, not only with the tools we're going to be discussing, but with the energy and commitment and fortitude of the people who are here today and watching online and in your networks more broadly, we do have a realistic chance of reaching that target soon. So thank you all for coming. I'm really excited by the discoveries we're going to make together over the next 48 hours, and I'm going to turn over now for a few more words of introduction to Anjali.
Thank you, James. We all... So welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the organizing committee as well. I'm Anjali Mazumder. I'm from the Alan Turing Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence in London, UK. And just wanted to share a few words about what the Alan Turing Institute is and does as a little background. So the Alan Turing Institute is a relatively new institute. It's less than 5 years old, and it was established by the UK government as a way to foster innovative research in the use of big data and algorithmic research. And it was set up in such a way to harness it by bringing together the leading academic institutions in the UK, that are focused in this area of research, as well as partnering with other charitable, government, and industry partners. And the partners from academia, or from government and industry, is wide-ranging, from the British Heart Foundation to the National Grid, to Microsoft, to Intel, to HSBC, and to government agencies such as the Ministry of Defense, the National Office for Statistics. So basically, the way that the Institute works is by harnessing the academic and the industry expertise to solve real fundamental data problems that can make an impact on the economy and society. And while its main ilk is probably made up of the data science and AI community, it also brings together the social scientists, the data ethics people, the philosophers, the social scientists, to really think about the impact of developing these algorithms and using them. So I'm very excited to be here. The Institute is now embarking in one of its programs on data science and AI for justice and human rights, in which I'm taking the lead, particularly on our modern slavery efforts. And it's just been really exciting to work with a great group of people and see how we can move things forward in this space. So, not going to take up any more time. And there we go.
So I think I'll follow the practice and work my way out and not bump into Anjali while I'm doing it. Hi, I'm Dan Lopresti. I'm a professor of computer science and engineering at Lehigh University. I want to add my welcome and thanks. I'm also a member of the Computing Research Association's CCC. CCC stands for the Computing Community Consortium. I'll say a few words about CCC. CCC is proud to be a sponsor of the Code 8.7 effort. And Computing Research Association represents all of the academic institutions across North America, as well as industrial research focused on research in computing and information sciences. So all of the universities that have PhD programs in computing and computer science and related subject areas are represented by CRA. CCC is a committee of the CRA that engages with the community. It's very much community driven. It gathers the community together to produce visions for computing research looking into the future. It also engages with policymakers and government agencies and funding agencies in the US. We're, as I said, very, very proud to be part of the Code 8.7 effort. I want to introduce or mention a few of my colleagues here representing CCC. We have Ann Drobnes, who's the director of CCC. We have Nadia Bliss, who is a fellow council member with me and director of the Arizona State University Global Security Initiative. Arizona State Global Security Initiative is also a very proud sponsor of the Code 8.7 effort. Keith Marzullo, who is the Dean of Information Studies at the University of Maryland, and Kari Douglas, who is an associate with CCC, all here, as well as a number of researchers from the community who we've invited, and we're very happy who can join us here at the Code 8.7 Kickoff Conference. Also, I want to mention a few of my colleagues who work in nonprofits and law enforcement, including Jennifer Long, who is the CEO of Equitas, which is a nonprofit focused on justice for victims of gender-based violence and human trafficking. Colleen Owens, who has a particular focus on labor trafficking in the fashion industry, and Jill Coaches, who is the director of the Lehigh County Regional Intelligence Investigation Center, works in law enforcement, and some of her colleagues too. We're all very happy to be here in support of this effort, and we look forward to this being the kickoff for a multi-year activity where we all work together and applying these techniques in the fight against modern slavery.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Hannah Darnton, and I am here from Business for Social Responsibility, or BSR, but I'm actually representing Tech Against Trafficking today. BSR serves as the Secretariat for Tech Against Trafficking, which is a relatively new collaborative initiative launched in June 2018 that serves as a real business-backed initiative by technology companies looking to leverage and support the advancement and the expertise and use of technology in the anti-trafficking sector. So we currently have 6 members. We have AT&T, BT, Nokia, Microsoft, Amazon, and Salesforce.org. And together, those 6 technology companies have come together to say, what resources do we have in-house that we can use to help support the existing initiatives out there, the organizations looking at how we can apply technology and really be able to scale it globally. And so they've come together to say, great, now we've identified these groups, and how can we use our own resources to make sure that we're able to really tackle that 9,000 issue. And so today we're here to really try to make sure that business is in the room, that they're in the table and understand how they can best support each and every one of you as you continue your efforts in this field. So just wanted to say a quick welcome and explain what we do, but also open it up for continuing dialogue. We're interested in really being able to support, and we want to know how to do that. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, and instead we really want to be an asset that each of you can use. So I'm here for 2 days, and please feel free to come up and tell us how we can be better serving everyone in this room. Great.
I'm glad to welcome you as well on behalf of the Rights Lab at the University of Nottingham. We're a group of about 100 academics, all focused on delivering research that might help end slavery by 2030. Really excited that you'll hear from a range of my colleagues over the next 2 days: Kevin Bales, Todd Landman, Doreen Boyd, James Goulding, Austin Choi Fitzpatrick. They come from a variety of disciplines: political science, sociology, computer science, from geography, from business. For us in the Rights Lab, this is a really exciting event. I think we are really seeking to understand how the research we do into modern slavery can be useful to all of you. I'm really committed to partnering all the time with NGOs, with governments, and with the business community. So for example, if we're mapping slavery from space, which my colleague Doreen is going to talk to you about later, how can we be achieving that in a way that delivers useful on-the-ground data for action, as well as data for global level action? How can it not just be something interesting to us looking at this satellite imagery? And we're also excited because although we've been trying to tackle slavery with tech for a few years now, I think today and tomorrow this event, Code 8.7, feels like the first time there is actual capacity around this question. It feels like the first time people are embracing the possibility of computational science and AI for this effort to end modern slavery by 2030. First time we're doing this at scale across a really multi-sector group of stakeholders. It's also my pleasure right now to introduce our first speaker on behalf of the organizing committee. Really excited to introduce Jessica Hubley, Laura Hackney, and Katie Hart. Jessica and Laura co-founded Annie Cannon's, which transforms survivors of human trafficking into software professionals. It builds software alongside them. Before founding Annie Cannon's, Laura ran the program on human rights at Stanford Center for Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. She was really focusing her research on trafficking in Southeast Asia. She also worked with the San Francisco Police Department Special Victims Unit to assist with trafficking enforcement in Mandarin-speaking communities. Jessica, before co-founding Annie Cannon's, was training and building her career as a lawyer. So she specialized in privacy and security compliance for software products for IT systems. And her practice's representation of dozens of software consultancies allowed the design of Annie Cannon's software consultancy model, really to improve on existing business models. They met through a mutual professor at Stanford, and they got the idea for Annie Cannon's whilst completing research in Myanmar, where, as with Laura's work in San Francisco, survivors who reached shelter had few to no quality job opportunities that would help them permanently escape enslavement. So they founded Annie Cannon's because they believed that this anti-slavery, anti-trafficking movement was underestimating and actually undervaluing survivors as problem solvers and as highly skilled workers. They set out to change that by adapting the coding bootcamp model that's popular in San Francisco to survivor populations worldwide. So Annie Cannon's today combines a bootcamp for core skills with a earn-to-learn program through its experienced staff. Since its founding, Annie Cannon's has trained a team of web and app developers who have built several mobile applications, web applications, dozens of websites. They do software support work, all for clients, Enigma Technologies, prominent venture capital firms. They build software, both for paying clients and with charitable funding, that helps make their graduates' ideas into solving realities. They are presently expanding both their training program and their consultancy business. And they are joined by Katie Hart, who is a web developer and graduate of their core training program and is herself a survivor leader and a trainer. So Jessica is now going to share with you some of the opportunities and challenges for our event.
Thank you all. As she said, my name is Jessica Hubley. This is my co-founder and CTO, Laura Hackney. Together, we built Annie Cannon's, a mission-based software consultancy that is staffed by survivors of human trafficking who we've taught to be software programmers. And in this work, we've had the privilege of getting to know many bright minds that were once hidden by exploitation. We've seen how their solutions to the problems that led to their exploitation take on a more insightful approach and often vastly different forms than those built without survivor consultation. What's more, we've seen what amazing software programmers they can become when they're given any realistic opportunity to rebuild their lives. And now we stand before you all in the face of an unprecedented opportunity. Billions of people around the world are vulnerable to trafficking simply because of where or how they were born. And billions of people around the world have dire basic needs that can be met either for the first time by or more effectively by innovative technology solutions. We've gathered here, in part, to explore this exciting opportunity. And the technology we need often already exists, but it must be distributed and applied effectively to make change. Now, most technologists in this room will readily agree that the development and distribution of technology benefit much from a detailed understanding of the user's needs, desires, and perspectives. Yet, this event is nearly unique in having actually allocated funding to make sure survivors can participate. Few such events involve survivors at all. And when they are invited, survivors are far too often an afterthought, or merely the source of a sensational story to activate a crowd. But you see, the opportunities we have to see technology solve critical global problems are entirely dependent upon finding, elevating, and echoing survivors' voices. For any machine to effectively identify or inhibit human trafficking, that machine must be trained by humans who have a holistic understanding of the reality of trafficking. And holistic understanding is most likely if one's understanding begins with firsthand experience. Groups like Survivor Alliance are organizing to provide this resource for our collective movement. But it's up to us to involve these survivors increasingly over time. Alongside them, we can accurately evaluate the scope of this opportunity. Machine learning and computational science provide a means to gather, clean, and analyze data. This comes as no surprise. But the more exciting opportunity for us is that software provides a mechanism to upgrade the infrastructure of care we provide to survivors, both after their escape and rescue, or before a vulnerable individual is exploited at all. Those caring for and working with survivors are thirsty for solutions that cut costs and improve outcomes of the care itself, which in turn prevents more trafficking. A caution, however, as we consider moving past machine learning and toward artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence poses a risk, and perhaps even a danger, because the very same biases and inequities that drive human trafficking in the first place. They are often unconscious. If we let haphazard artificial intelligence make decisions in an attempt to help survivors in the near term, we risk seeing these biases and inequities drive that artificial intelligence to do even more harm than good. Indeed, the biases and inequities that drive human trafficking have caused some artificial intelligence to go astray already. For example, this Twitter bot, built by a major tech company, took less than 24 hours to learn to be racist and misogynistic from the most viral content that it read on Twitter. See, we all carry these biases. I see them every day as I watch people doubt and deny that survivors whom they know literally nothing else about could possibly be software programmers. But it's worth noting that despite hearing this constant bias, no one has ever been more critical of the capacity of a survivor than she is herself on the first day of class. We cannot ignore the existence of this bias, but let not our excitement about what we can do limit our consideration of what we should do or what we're ready to do. Annie Cannons has been building technology with survivors and building survivors' technology for years now. Our team has designed several products to fight human trafficking and exploitation, but we would still not say that we know enough to dictate the methods by which 20 to 50 million distinct individuals of diverse races and genders all over the world would be served by any single decision-making framework. And it's critical to remember that what is built too hastily often poses a danger of hurting survivors, not merely failing to help them. Any useful product will not be built overnight. It will not be a hackathon that introduces a room full of programmers to this problem and solves it in the same day. It must be a dedicated, persistent, and coordinated effort of a body such as this, a body dedicated to learning first and acting best. And it cannot be done for free. So let us first think of how machine learning and computational science can help us learn, to gain insight from the data we have, and how it can help us save vast measures of human effort to answer research questions more quickly, because that is valuable from the outset. And this underlying data deserves more than just a moment of our attention. To understand what a machine might reasonably and accurately learn from data, we must ask ourselves, first, what data do we actually have, and what data do we lack? How accurate is that data likely to be, and why? How comprehensive is that data likely to be, and what is it lacking? And who produced the data and how? And know that whatever we may know, we do not know the answer to any one of these questions with certainty. Still, it can be helpful to acknowledge the limits of the data we have, because I think this acknowledgement will help us avoid mistaken conclusions. And fortunately, there is so much data created every moment in this world that even if we must eliminate oodles of it for empirical quality, there's still bound to be some useful stuff left over. Significant power and influence is gathered here today. I implore you all to be mindful that despite this need for quality data, the fight against human trafficking needs more economic options for survivor, much more than it needs, and perhaps before it needs more data. We can take heart that this conference has been one of the too few to fund the active participation of survivors. If we all undertake to apply computer science to help them, we must also undertake an obligation to see their voices and needs heard throughout development, and to get their hands on the development itself. Trust me, you will love the results. When one of our pilot students delivered her very first progressive web application to an Annie Cannon's client, the client's response was to say it was the highest quality software product ever delivered to her for testing in a 31-year career in health tech. So here is our suggestion for how to approach fighting human trafficking through computational science. First, hire survivors to consult from the point that you begin to gather data. Then learn from them and from your good data before you decide what you're going to do to fight trafficking. Most people think that the best way to fight trafficking is to rescue victims, but most survivors can physically leave on their own if they have a viable economic opportunity and a consciousness of that opportunity. In fact, even after rescue, most of our students say they were re-exploited 3 to 7 times and were re-rescued before finding their own way out, simply because they lacked any viable economic options. In other words, there's no value in using technology to discover 9,000 victims a day if you cannot provide them with an alternative that's better than the status quo, an alternative that's better than now be homeless and starve. But there is immense value in using technology to solve for how to help these victims leave and build a new life without starving or becoming homeless. Second, if you are producing data for this fight, be wary. A lack of rigorous procedure and thorough analysis could cause mistakes that actually cost lives. As humans, we are all built to have extra misconceptions about a problem like this. As humans, our drive for peace of mind inclines us to believe that the world is somehow just in the face of abundant evidence to the contrary. Beware of the danger of missing evidence we don't want to see, much less look for. And finally, if you undertake to become a steward of the sensitive personal information of another, be sure you are prepared to undertake the protection of the security and privacy of that information. We must not create data that can be misused to hurt more people, nor allow the technology we build to hurt them itself, much less including by enabling their abusers. So there you have it, our excitement and our caution. I'll hand off to Kevin with this. Gathered here are dozens of survivors who want this world to change as much as you do. And the best thing that you can do over the next 2 days to eliminate slavery from this earth is to listen to them. And if a consensus technology is created through this collaboration, the survivors of Annie Cannons will be excited to help you build it. Thank you.
That was so much truth, I'm a little head spinny, I have to say. That was just so powerful and exactly what we've been hearing. And I have to say, interesting, other people last night said very similar words to me, particularly about no point in freedom if you're going to end up being homeless and starving from other countries and so forth. I'm an enormous fan of Annie Cannons, as you can probably tell by now. Well. Oh, thank you. Okay. I get to be the person who looks back, looks forward, does the old man's reinterpretation of everything, so I hope you'll enjoy. I wanted to say, though, I wanted to touch on 9,000 a day, and just because I think about that a lot, and I think about particularly the whole notion that I've been very keen on about bringing ideas over into our field from epidemiology. If we could vaccinate, I mean, if there was an inoculation against slavery, we would be out there getting 9,000 a day. The programs are, in a sense, would be understandable and achievable. We don't have that, but we do know a lot about how to make the situations change in which people can bring themselves to freedom and to stabilize that freedom and so forth. If we brought an epidemiological model to it and used that in order to plan, instead of some of the more sort of confused and complex ideas that we often have in social science, I think we'd be able to move forward a little faster. So that's my one tiny plug about 9,000 a day. If we thought like epidemiologists, we might get there more quickly. Is this going to? Oh yeah, there we go. I wanted to start off with a shout out to the Human Rights Data Analysis Group. I don't think there's anyone here from HRDAG and Patrick Ball's organization and so forth. It's just that they've been doing the kind of work that we're organizing around today in a large group, and they've been doing it as sole practitioners pretty much in very dangerous situations in war zones around the world. 25 years now they've been doing this kind of work on human rights, and I just felt like before I stood up and people thought I had something to say about this, I wanted to say there are people who know a lot more than I do and who did a lot more before I got here. That said, we are at this fantastic moment. And it's the sort that James is very excited about and we're all excited about. For example, this recent piece in Thomson Reuters showing how the meetings had finally occurred in which large numbers of governments and agencies got together and said we're going to share our data on contemporary forms of slavery and trafficking. We're going to actually make that happen. Now, they said it. Are they going to do it? That's another question. And certainly for almost 20 years, I've been involved in conversations with groups who said they were going to share the data and they didn't quite share the data, and then they didn't want to share all the data and so forth. But if we're actually at this moment and this room full, and particularly the convening work of UNU has made it possible that we could be there and be able to begin to look at the quality of the data as well as the origins of the data. And then I get to jump absolutely backwards in time, now that I've been looking to the future, because one of the things we do in the Rights Lab is also think about what we call the anti-slavery usable past. One of the things about this contemporary anti-slavery movement is that it's actually the fourth one in human history, and that most of us know nothing about the history and the lessons of the previous three movements. That we are, I can assure you, as someone who also is something of a historian, we're repeating many of the problems and the mistakes that previous anti-slavery movements have made, not least until recently the complete devaluation of survivors is one of the ones that also went in the past. I only throw this up because when I started thinking about our work in information technology, and I was thinking about if you go back to the very origins of information technology, in other words, Sumerian cuneiform, 5,000 BC, 4,000 BC, you end up with the very first symbolic representations of words like female slave. which you can see there across, and that's the evolution of those ideograms across the bottom. Why do I even talk about that? Because we can learn from that past as well, and we can say, you know, if we're going to bring computational things like computational corpus linguistic analysis, we can do that on cuneiform as well. We can actually look to the past to learn from the past. I'm not going to talk about the past anymore, I promise, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a little teaser, because there may be people in this room who say, wait, my colleague next door does cuneiform, and we have ancient slave treaties, and we could bring the I could get a paper out of that in Nature or Science, or, you know, something like that. I'm happy in some ways, though, to talk about very recent history. So computational science, supporting advances in satellite detection of slavery. So it seems strange to say this sort of 2 years, 3 years later, but I can now refer to that as the early period. Some years before that, I was in Bangladesh, and I was working on the enslavement of children in fish processing camps that feed into shrimp and fish exports to the United States, North America, Western Europe, and so forth. This is a satellite picture that I pulled off Google Earth at the time, because I was looking in the Sunderbans UNESCO World Heritage Site, a place that should be only protected mangrove forests, and I was around, in the water around, all this on the left of the screen is in fact obviously not part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It shouldn't be there. What on earth is it? And this was the sort of thing that we were beginning to explore and do the research on. If you zoom in, all those little bumps that look like buildings aren't buildings, they're fish drying racks. And the children, and it's almost only children who are lured into that work, tricked away from their parents, taken down into the UNESCO World Heritage Site, put to work there, suffered in really horrific treatment in these sites, and had a very high mortality rate. You'll notice in the back, there are some racks that go up much higher. And we have a photo from a very brave Bangladeshi photographer of a modern slave driver actually beating children to make them work faster in the fish drying racks and so forth. This type of enslavement was virtually unknown even in Bangladesh. There was an awareness, but some other researchers had helped me to reach this point. And we began to, once I got to Nottingham and got to meet people like Doreen Boyd and other people, and said, could we actually use satellites to explore this idea that there are these very blatant examples of carving out of protected forests in order to do criminal activity in using enslaved workers. And the satellite experts like Doreen said, maybe, let's put a grad student on it, which we did. And within 3 or 4 weeks, the grad student had not only easily detected 5 previously unknown sites of this level of exploitation, probably unknown to us, but maybe not to the corrupt police of that part of Bangladesh, but had also been able to go back over the historical records of satellite imagery that stretch back about 20 years and show how they moved around the UNESCO World Heritage Site and also reacted to climate change itself of rising sea levels, meaning that these slave-using sites had to be moved. It was a deep and sudden insight into a type of enslavement widespread that feeds into our supply chains that allowed us to see things in a new way. From there, we said, hey, let's try some more things. And we went to this idea of using Zooniverse for crowdsourcing. So lots of students helped us to participate to examine satellite imagery from across India, Pakistan, and Nepal to look for brick kilns. Now, I've also spent a lot of time in brick kilns in Pakistan in particular, and they're known as an area of very high levels of exploitation, particularly in forms of debt bondage, but of whole families. And but one of the questions that had been part of all of this has always been, well, how many brick kilns are there? No one knew the answer to that question. There was that tyranny of big numbers when people are forced to make a guess and they say 100,000, right? 2 million. So that's all we had was some guesses. This was to help us both count them and decide and to know truly where they were. Pretty soon we realized, yes, we can do this. We can find them. We can use the crowdsourcing with machine learning going on behind the crowdsourcing to teach a learned machine, a bit of AI, to spot those slavery sites. And of course, it being much more quick than we are as human beings, within moments, well, a day or two or three, it was able to then process out and for the first time identify every one of those yellow dots is a brick kiln, all of the brick kilns in the brick belt. And what you're seeing there is the north of India, the Appalachians, the Himalayas. we should be so lucky. Yeah, the Himalayas, crossing over into Bangladesh, up into Pakistan, and so forth. So now we have a number. Now we have a GPS location for every one of them. We could completely overwhelm all of the law enforcement of all of the countries involved if we said we would now like to have all of them inspected. But at least we have a notion about where they are and what they do. We're also, and now I'm flipping back to the Sumerians in a way, but also forward, we're beginning to use notions of computational corpus linguistics to explore the minds of slaveholders. And this also comes in part of the enslaved. And in a sense, this is also reflective of our deep association and involvement with survivors. But if you're not familiar with this kind of computational corpus linguistics, I made a word cloud, right? Because you can do that on the web, and I'm not as good as, say, these two are in terms of programming or anything like that. So, but I did use this about 30,000 words out of survivor narratives, created this little word cloud. So this is survivor thinking. But of course, what happens with corpus linguistics is something much deeper, much deeper. The analysis of very deep relationships between tenses of words, word positions, all of those sorts of things. What does it tell us when we put over 1 million words of survivor narratives into a corpus, which then allows computational analysis? Well, things like this. Survivors rarely use the future tense or talk about the future when they write and explain things. Some of these are taken down orally, but many of them were written as well. And if they do touch on the future, they immediately follow this with a sudden past tense. Now, when you were talking about we have to understand the lived experience of slavery to really make a difference when we address the situation of enslavement, then this is part of this. And I have to say, those of us who have even worked in this field for decades have been learning vast things out of this corpus linguistic work. For example, it backs up what survivors have been explaining to us about what I'm calling atemporality and aspatiality, the fact that caught in that situation of total control and violent control, one removes oneself from your own future. You stop thinking about the future. You stop thinking about the past. You live in a total and immersive present, and it's a present in which you must stay in order to reduce the amount of pain and suffering, because thinking about the future takes you out of the space that the person who controls you wants you in. Thinking about the past brings pain and also takes you out of the space the person who controls you wants you in. So, as one survivor said to me, living in a moment of atemporality meant I was able to reduce the amount of literal pain I experienced. Now, I have to say, I'm just one more of the hundreds of mostly old white men who have written about slavery, made laws about slavery, explained things about slavery and trafficking to the world who has never been there. And I want to just say, I'm ready to hang up my spurs and hand this back, because in literally a matter of months, I've learned more about that true lived experience of slavery from the understanding of narratives, and also from survivors who have become scholars than I had over decades. We can also take the same techniques, though, to slaveholders. So here's a slaveholder I once met. He actually, my friend tricked him and said, "Tell me about your quarry." And he was very proudly showing off all of the families that his family had owned for many generations that worked this quarry in northern India. Austin, who's here, there he is. It's way in the back. He's the guy with the peace sign way in the back. Has said, and I have to say this is something he and I have talked about for years, about if this goal of freedom is to change lives of enslaved people, but to really end slavery, we've got to reclaim slaveholders as well. I know that can be something slightly controversial, but I would only offer as evidence the United States of America, where we took 4 million people up out of slavery and then dumped them with no 40 acres and a mule, no support, no viable occupational way of making a living or a livelihood. And then we also fundamentally left them tied to places and land living next door to slaveholders who themselves were still angry about the fact that their property had been taken from them, no compensation and so forth. We don't want to repeat the botched emancipation of the United States, the one that's still being paid for in blood today around the world. We want a different type of abolition, a different type of emancipation. But here's these fascinating things that Austin's work with slaveholders is bringing forward. This fascinating sense that when you're accustomed to privilege, you know, equality feels like you're being oppressed. Or I'll just take that one at the top. You know, a slaveholder saying to Austin, in those days we used to keep these bonded laborers, slaves. They used to stay here as family members. Now they're filing court cases against me. Like, how dare they? And the cognitive dissonance and the inability to shift their worldview to a situation in which they can be part of a better future with the people that they had in the past been in this destructive relationship with. That's all part of where we hope we can open that up. Also, we're very keen to look at these pro-slavery groups and people like ISIS. Now, ISIS is on its way down, we hope, but I just noticed, I don't know if you all read Dabiq. Do you read the online ISIS magazine? I just warn you, if you do, sometimes the security forces like to ask questions like why you're doing that, but this is a recent article that I found fascinating, which was their rationalization and justification, the article called The Revival of Slavery Before the Hour, of why it was okay for ISIS to be involved. And we took that, and because another area of our work is all about the relationship of contemporary forms of slavery in conflict, we found in some recent work not yet published from one of our team members that ISIS was looking at, and he got hold of recently recovered and discovered ISIS records that have been harvested from the battlefield, that ISIS was making $2 million a day from slave trafficking in 2014. And there actually was a person who's in charge of this who was called the Minister of Spoils. But it was this is what was being bankrolling a lot of the ISIS military effort. We've been using that as part of even a larger contextualized piece, just to tell you something about how contemporary slavery and conflict and terrorism have fit together. We've taken all the wars, all the conflicts since 1989, the end of the Cold War. We put them all, there were 1,113 of them. We coded all of them for signs of enslavement and trafficking. But this was the big surprise, even for those of us who thought there was a lot of slavery and conflict. Almost 90% of all the conflicts, all those over 1,000 conflicts since 1989, have had some form of enslavement as part of those conflicts. And now we're pushing the data back to 1946, but the key thing here is clearly we're missing a trick if we don't start our conversations about conflicts with conversations about what are we going to do about the slavery that's about to occur. We know that once a war intensifies, and from the data we've collected, hits 1,000 battle deaths, slavery increases very dramatically. We know it's most likely to occur when it's rebels versus state and so forth. And then I think everybody gets this, the idea that we can start layering this information up. So just a quick picture of slavery, murders, deforestation in the Amazon, all layered together in ways that help us to understand those relationships over time. That's the Amazon basin, southern half, and the way the deforestation's been cutting in. So I'll just say, previews of coming attractions. We're very excited about Nottingham is the place where MRI was invented. The man who did it there got a Nobel Prize. We have a very large MRI facility. We're very keen to do matched tests, MRI work on people who have been caught up in trafficking and slavery against people matched in the samples, to understand. MRI has been done on Holocaust survivors, Romanian orphans, others, plenty of soldiers, but we need to understand this to better think through the epigenetic impact of enslavement, but also how it might inform the therapeutic responses. And likewise, we're taking some very broadened ideas and looking at the whole patterns of the Anthropocene, this anthropic change over time, and what that's going to do to the planet, and where the issue of enslavement might fit. Because, you know, if you take your worst case scenarios, you actually get out to a point where you realize no one would care because there's nothing to eat and the water's up to our noses anyway. Right? So I want to thank you from the Rights Lab. We really like being here, and we're excited, very excited to take part. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. As he demonstrated, Kevin is a man who needs no introduction. Thanks for jumping in. But one of the reasons we wanted Kevin to help us kick things off this morning is because he's always been at pushing the boundary of what is possible and what is actually being done in this field. So thank you, Kevin, for showing us that you're still pushing that boundary. I think what we've heard from some of the introductory speakers is that the boundary here of what is possible in finding solutions is partly a function of technology, but it's also very significantly partly a function of our imagination. And our imagination itself is shaped by our understanding, and in particular by our empathy. And thank you, Jessica and Laura, for being here and helping us really think that through from the very beginning. I want to say just a few words before I hand over to Todd, who's going to moderate the next session, about the structure of the agenda for the next 2 days. And I might ask Alexandra and Emily to come up in case they have any housekeeping points that they want to add. This is, by the way, Emily Chalette and Alexandra Ciccone, who've made this all possible. Thank you both for all your hard work to get us here and organized today. So as you've been hearing this morning, there are a myriad of ways, and we're really just beginning to scratch the surface, that computational science, apparently, computational science, AI, and machine learning may potentially be able to help us accelerate that progress towards that elusive 9,000 target. Today is all about opportunities. What are those opportunities? We've begun to hear. The next session will have a showcase of some of the other opportunities that we'll be talking to you about in more depth later during the day, in sessions that we describe as hothouse sessions. Now, that's not a comment on the temperature of the HVAC in the building, although perhaps we do want to lower it a little bit. It's more about trying to create an environment in which ideas can grow and bloom very quickly. So those hothouses will be held in this room and literally in the room next door. And you'll see on your agenda which room houses which hothouse. You'll see a sneak peek of some of the things that will be discussed in those hothouses on this next opportunity showcase that will follow right after this. The hothouses are designed to be interactive. So please go to them with the spirit of bringing your ideas, of brainstorming, of creativity, of really trying to stretch our imaginations and our understanding and the boundary of the possible. In each hothouse, there will be a rapporteur, and those rapporteurs will kick us off tomorrow. And just a small reminder, tomorrow we will not be in this building. We will be over at the United Nations. Now, there's a possibility of snow tomorrow, so please allow a little bit more time to get through security in the morning. I would suggest that you would probably want to be at security by 8:30, 8:45 for a 9:30 kickoff. Do bring a government-issued photo ID with you, please. So the rapporteurs will kick us off, and their job is not only to tell you what you missed out on in the hothouse, one of the two parallel hothouses that you didn't get to go to, but also to summarize key themes and to get us thinking not just about opportunities, but challenges. So tomorrow is more about the challenges. Yes, the opportunities, but let's be realistic. How do we find and allocate resources? How do we continue collaboration? What barriers, regulatory, ethical, or other, might there be to information sharing? How do we actually develop technology pipelines to develop new technology and distribute it, as Jessica said, to where it needs to go? All of these kinds of questions will be at the center of discussions tomorrow, and we're having them at the UN in part because these are policy questions to some degree. So we're hopeful that we will also be joined by a number of representatives from missions to the United Nations during the sessions tomorrow. Are there any questions about the agenda at this point? No? Emily or Alex, is there anything you want to add about anything? Yes?
Hi everyone, it's great to see a full room. I just have two reminders. The event is being live streamed. So if you are a participant asking a question, making a comment, or a speaker making a presentation, please speak into the mic so that the audio is carried through to the live stream. Also, even though the event is being live streamed and photographed, I would just be mindful of the photos that you take for your personal use and focus it on the presenters. And if you are taking pictures of participants, please make sure that you have their consent to post it on your social media or any public-facing platform. And that's it from me.
The one last comment from me is to anybody who is watching on the live stream. Welcome. I think it's on this side. We will be taking your questions during the following sessions. We're not doing Q&A right now, but please send us your questions. If you're in the audience here, please use the hashtag code87. That's how we will know to receive your questions on social media or in the comments box on the Facebook page. We will collect those questions, and moderators will endeavor to ask questions from social media as well as from you here in the room. Without further ado then, can I invite the next panel up to join us? And I'm going to hand over now to Professor Todd Landman.
Thanks, James. Hey, that's really cool. Boyd, Goulden, you all right? Yeah. Great. Okay. I think we'll all just stay seated because we're going to lose time walking out the front. Yeah. I'm going to come back there as well. Todd Landman, nice to meet you. I'm going to ask everyone to stay behind the table because we're short for time. Yeah. Hello, Todd Landman. Nice to meet you. I'm going to ask everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm going to ask people just to stay behind the table. I think
Sure.
a lot of wasted your time.
Sure. No problem.
Hello.
Behind here rather than going to the front.
I'm only doing half my slides anyway.
Yeah. The Brazilian guy, Fabiano. And Cook. Huh? No, that's right. It's on both sides.
Oh, mine is as well.